Chapter 12. Dillon stared at the paper Dan had handed him.
I don't understand. Are you telling me Julian Davis is not a man in his 30s working for my mother? I don't know who is working for your mother, but his name isn't Julian Davis. This social you gave me is fake, probably so the guy wouldn't have to pay taxes.
Fear coursed through Dillon's veins. Who was this man his mother had hired, and what did he want? Worse yet, was his mother safe with him there? Was Kaitlyn? Or had she already arrived in town?
What do I do? Is there anything? I have to pick him up with the knowledge I have. I can't guarantee the penalty will be much, though. Maybe a year in jail for falsifying his name and social. Of course, if anything else is in his background when we find out who he really is, I promise I'll do my best. Has he done anything else?
Dillon shook his head.
I think he might have stolen a charm from my room, but I can't prove it. Even theft would add a few more years. Let's go pick this guy up, and I'll work on getting a search warrant for his room.
Dillon nodded, but his head was spinning with all the information. How long had Julian been working for his mother? What was his purpose in lying to her?
Yeah, I just need to... What time is it?
Dan glanced at his wrist.
6:03.
What? Dillon snapped to attention. That meant Kaitlyn was already at the restaurant. He needed to contact her to explain his tardiness.
Give me a second. I'm supposed to be somewhere and I'm late.
He pulled his cell phone out of his pocket and punched in Kaitlyn's number.
Come on, he muttered as the phone rang. Pick up.
Hi, this is Kaitlyn Bell. I can't get to my phone right now.
Ugh, I can't get her on the phone. She might be in trouble. Can you come with me and then we can pick up Julian? Sure, let me inform the higher-ups in case we need backup.
Dan stepped into the back office for a minute and then he was back, gun strapped to his side.
Let's go.
As he pushed open the door, Dillon's head tilted. Something didn't look right with his truck. He took another step closer.
I think we might have more evidence.
Dan whistled as he took in the slashed tires. Not just one, but all 4.
That takes some guts to slash tires on a truck while it's parked at a police station. Yeah, I think Kaitlyn and my apprehension around him may have caused him to escalate. Any chance I can get a ride?
Dan smiled, and Dillon realized he didn't look much older than he had when Dillon had been a kid.
You bet you can. Let's go get this guy.
Kaitlyn checked her phone as she parked. 2 minutes to spare. She glanced around the parking lot and was surprised not to see Dillon's truck. What could be taking him so long in town? She dropped the phone back in her purse. She'd opted for a skirt for dinner and it had no pocket. As she stepped out of the SUV, the hairs on the back of her neck prickled. She'd had the feeling someone was watching her, but after a survey of the parking lot, she could see no one. Surely she was still just on edge after the incident with Julian earlier. The snow crunched under her boots as she made her way up the sidewalk and into the restaurant. Inside, the lighting was dim, and Kaitlyn had to blink a few times to make her eyes adjust. A woman in a crisp white shirt and black pants stood behind a desk near the entrance. "May I help you?" she asked as Kaitlyn approached. "Yes, I'm supposed to be meeting Dillon Fields here. He said he made a reservation." The woman dropped her eyes to scan a sheet in front of her. "Here he is, right this way." Kaitlyn followed the woman to a table in the far back of the restaurant. "It appears you have arrived first. Would you like to wait or go ahead and sit down?" "I'll sit. I'm sure he's just running a few minutes late." The woman flashed a smile, but it was one of those, "I'm sure you're right, though that's never the case," kind of smiles. Then she handed Kaitlyn one menu and placed the other on the table across from her. "I'll be right back with some water." Kaitlyn opened the menu and dropped her eyes to scan the offerings. She was a sucker for Italian food, and everything sounded delicious. A chair scraped against the floor, and her face shot up to welcome Dillon. But it was not Dillon who sat across from her. "Julian, what are you doing here?" A smile spread across his features.
"I thought you might be lonely since Dillon won't make it."
Fear covered Kaitlyn, but she tried to stay composed. She was safe as long as she stayed in the restaurant. "And why is that?"
"He's off with his girlfriend. You know, the leggy blonde from last night?"
Even though Kaitlyn suspected Julian wasn't telling the truth, a tiny kernel of doubt and jealousy sprouted within her. Dillon would never do that, would he? And how would you know that?
"Because I just saw him over at Stetson's, the steakhouse. They looked pretty cozy to me."
"I see. And how did you know I'd be here?" Kaitlyn's heart was thundering in her chest. She just hoped Julian couldn't hear it.
"Let's not be coy, Kaitlyn. You know I'm interested in you. I overheard you and Dillon talking."
He reached across the table for her hand. She wanted to yank it out of his grip. His hand was hot and clammy, and his touch sent a shudder through her.
"Now, how about we get out of here and go somewhere private?" "I don't think you'll be going anywhere except to jail."
A man in a police uniform clapped his hand down on Julian's shoulder. Dillon appeared behind the man.
"What for? Last time I checked, it's not illegal to have dinner with a friend."
Julian's voice was confident, but Kaitlyn saw the flicker of fear cross his eyes.
"That's true, but falsifying your ID is. I'm not sure who you are, but you're not Julian Davis. Now please stand up and put your hands behind your back."
He hauled Julian to his feet and snapped handcuffs on his wrists.
"You have the right to remain silent,"
he began, as he walked Julian towards the entrance. Dillon watched them for a minute before he turned back to Kaitlyn. A sheepish smile was on his face.
"Sorry I'm late."
Relief flooded Kaitlyn, and she sagged back in her chair. "You are forgiven. I don't want to think about what would have happened if you hadn't shown up."
"Me either."
Dillon sat down in the seat recently vacated and grasped Kaitlyn's hand. "Who do you think he is?" Kaitlyn glanced back toward the entrance, afraid that somehow he would have escaped the police escort and come back for her.
"I don't know, but Dan will find out. I'm glad I went to see him today."
"Me too." Kaitlyn bit her lip. She didn't want to second-guess Dillon, and she was sure Julian had been lying, but she had to know. "Can I ask why you were in town today?"
"Oh yeah, I almost forgot."
He reached into his pocket and pulled out a box.
"I came into town for this. I had purchased it earlier, but somehow it disappeared. I'm pretty sure we'll find it in Julian's room."
Kaitlyn took the box and opened it. Her breath caught in her throat as she looked at the charm. It was a tiny representation of a boy and a girl at a movie theater, their first official date. As if just yesterday, the memory played in her mind. Kaitlyn stood in her living room waiting for the knock. She'd started getting ready almost an hour ago to make sure she was perfect when Dillon arrived. Dillon Fields. She still couldn't believe he had asked her out. Dillon was the star quarterback, and she was the shy art student. Yet he had sought her out after her mother died and friended her. Their friendship had grown over the years, and though Kaitlyn harbored feelings for him, she hadn't thought they were returned. Until now.
"Where are you guys going again?"
her father asked from his chair. He had gotten home early enough to have dinner with her tonight. A rarity. She knew he needed to work, especially with her mother gone, but Kaitlyn sure wished he could be home more often. "Just to the movies, Dad. We'll probably only be gone for 2 to 3 hours. His eyes traveled down to her toes and his eyebrow arched.
"You're a little dressed up for a movie, aren't you?"
Heat spread across Kaitlyn's cheeks. She had picked a cute skirt and a top to wear to the movies. Jeans just didn't seem right for a first date. The knock on the door saved her from having to answer, and she hurried to open the door.
"Wow."
Dillon blinked at her.
"You look beautiful."
The heat, which had just started receding, flared again. "Thank you."
"Hello, Mr. Bell,"
Dillon said, addressing her father.
"Hello, Dillon. I assume I don't have to give you the speech about Kaitlyn being my daughter and you being on your best behavior."
Kaitlyn looked down at the floor, mortified. "Dad," she muttered. This time the red spread across Dillon's cheeks.
"No, sir. I have nothing but the best intentions toward your daughter." "Good to hear. You two have fun."
Kaitlyn knew this was their chance to escape before her father said anything else and embarrassed them both. She grabbed Dillon's hand, shouted a goodbye to her father, and pulled Dillon out the door. "Sorry about my dad," she said as she pulled the door shut behind her.
"It's fine. I can understand his hesitation. After all, you are his only daughter."
Kaitlyn laughed and shook her head. "I'm his only child."
"Even more reason for him to be protective."
They reached the car, but before he opened her door, he turned her to face him.
"I don't want to ever hurt you, Kaitlyn."
Kaitlyn's heart sped up in her chest. He was so close she could see the tiny gold flecks in his brown eyes. She wanted to reach up and touch his face, but her body felt frozen. How many times had she imagined this moment? It was as if time stood still. His hand grazed her cheek as he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Then he curled his hand around the back of her neck. Could he hear her heart hammering in her chest? It seemed like an eternity as he stared into her eyes, her soul. But finally his eyes closed, and Kaitlyn knew the moment was finally here. She shut her eyes so she could focus on her other senses. The feel of his lips, the taste. They were soft like satin when they touched hers. Not hot, but a flame erupted within her nonetheless. The kiss lasted only a moment, but the tingling sensation stayed much longer.
"We better get going or we'll miss the movie,"
he said as he pulled back. She could only nod. Her throat seemed unwilling to speak. He flashed a crooked smile at her and opened the door. Kaitlyn climbed in, and as Dillon walked around to the driver's side door, she touched her lips. They weren't hot to the touch, but the fire inside her hadn't cooled. If this was what kissing was like, she hoped they shared many more in the future. "It's beautiful, Dillon."
"It's nowhere near as beautiful as you."
Kaitlyn smiled. She wanted to enjoy the moment, but she had one nagging doubt that she had to clear up first. "So, you didn't see Shauna today?" Dillon's forehead creased.
"No. Why should I see Shauna?"
"I'm sorry. I knew it wasn't true, but when you were late, Julian said he saw you with Shauna. I just had to ask."
"It's okay. I understand your concern with Shauna, but I promise you she is out of my life. I only have room in my heart for one woman, and that woman is you."
With those words, all the stress and doubt from before shattered, and Kaitlyn felt relief for the first time in days. Now they could talk about the bigger issue at hand. "Does your mother know about Julian?" Dillon shook his head.
"No, I told her I was going to check him out today, but I haven't had a chance to talk to her. She's going to be so disappointed."
"I just don't get it. Why pretend to be someone else?" Dillon shook his head, but before he could speak, the waitress appeared at their table. Sorry. I was told to give you some time after the incident. Are the two of you okay?
We are, Dillon said. Can we get a bottle of your best wine? I believe we'd like to celebrate.
The waitress smiled. Absolutely. I'll be right back with it. As she turned away, Kaitlyn glanced back down at the menu. In all the commotion, she had almost forgotten they were there for dinner.
Do you know what you want?
Dillon asked as he perused his own menu. Kaitlyn chuckled. I thought I felt like spaghetti, but now I'm feeling more like the sampler platter.
Living on the edge, huh?
I guess so. She smiled at Dillon as the waitress returned with their glasses and they placed their order. Though their conversation drifted away from Julian, Kaitlyn couldn't get him out of her mind. Who was he really? And why was there something about him that seemed familiar? When dinner ended, Dillon picked up the check and took Kaitlyn's hand as they left the restaurant.
I hope you don't mind giving me a ride back.
Of course not, she said. But why? What happened to your truck?
Someone slashed my tires while I was parked at the police station.
Julian?
I can't think of anyone else. He must really have wanted to get you alone.
The words sent a shiver down Kaitlyn's spine. Had Dillon been somewhere more remote, she might not have been rescued, and who knows what would have happened. As she climbed in the driver's side, she thanked God for watching out for her and for sending Dillon back into her life. She didn't know how they were going to work out the distance or what the future might hold, but she was sure she wanted Dillon in it.